Welcome to Searching Smarter with Selby Jennings, the podcast for hiring managers and professionals navigating the job market within financial sciences and services. Whether you're searching for top talent to grow your team or considering your own career move, this podcast will help you do so with confidence. I'm your host, Jesse Scaff, Global Client Director for Phaidon International's financial sciences and services brand, Selby Jennings.
Tell me what the cybersecurity talent market looks like. Tell me what the cybersecurity product market looks like.
We continue to see a sort of 20 to 25% increased value, whether that be compensation or in other forms of how companies show value for their employees. The builders, the security engineering and architecture folks, that's probably the most highly sought after, most highly technical type of skill set that we find out there.
How is AI benefiting, developing, growing cyber defense and cybersecurity, especially as it pertains to talent?
I stand firmly with the concept of, AI is not taking anyone's cybersecurity jobs.
The demand for cybersecurity is still underhyped, or it's already reached its peak, it's behind us, and this is what we have is what we got. It's overhyped.
So
today's episode is about cybersecurity. My guest is Giancarlo Hirsch, head of Glocomms for Phaidon International. We talk about how AI is affecting and impacting the cybersecurity talent market and programs at clients, as well as the remote and hybrid work scenario for those in cybersecurity and what their skill sets are, and generally what the talent network looks like and the availabilities for this type of skill set across not just financial services, but technology and for cyber professionals around the world. So if you're interested, please tune in. We have a lot to say, and Giancarlo is an absolute expert in the space. So please stay tuned. This is a really interesting conversation. Good to have you on. Good to see you. Anyway, we see each other around the office, but good to see you in this setting.
you too. I don't know how often we've had a little virtual one-on-one, given all the human interaction over the last decade. So it is nice to see you in this setting.
Very good. Very good. So obviously quite a pertinent topic and lots to talk about. We could probably have a 20-hour episode today. But tell me what the cybersecurity talent market looks like. Tell me what the cybersecurity product market looks like in general from your perspective and from your team's perspective.
Yeah, the under-brokered cybersecurity talent market is something that continues to be really relevant for a widespread group of customers. To touch on it briefly, we continue to see a sort of 20 to 25% increased value, whether that be compensation or in other forms of how companies show value for their employees for the cybersecurity talent, particularly that have very technical backgrounds. And over the course of the last few years, which have been turbulent across the technology industry, we have seen this stability remain within the cybersecurity organizations, where there's an acute awareness of how hard it is to regain this talent and how important it is to sort of retain it.
And are there specific skill sets that are most prevalent or most populated, or is it just across the board, anything relating to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so we talk about cybersecurity in sort of three buckets. We talk about builders, protectors, and policymakers. And so for the builders, the security engineering and architecture folks, that's probably the most highly sought after, most highly technical type of skill set that we find out there. Those are folks who we've seen retain their jobs additionally, for the last few years.
Yep, sure.
That you can't just sort of cut by 20%, and they already operate quite leanly. So that's been a great place where we haven't seen too much talent movement, candidly. And then lastly, in the sort of policymaker category, information security, governance, risk, compliance, this is an ever-evolving regulatory system that continues to change, whether it be the new administration in office for the United States or just various ongoing, updates to policies and procedures. So there remains a strong need for this talent, though it comes from slightly less technical background. Might not change the fact that it's still quite desirable and a group of folks that people have retained a lot over the years.
And since I know Glocomms, obviously, for those who may not know, Glocomms is the non-financial technology arm of Phaidon International, but the cybersecurity part of Glocomms is across the spectrum and does support our financial services businesses. So Are you seeing a difference in the roles available, the skill sets applicable in financial services versus outside the industry, and specifically to cybersecurity? And if so, what does that difference look like?
Yeah, so I think that the skill sets are the same that we're talking about, right? In terms of builders, protectors, and policymakers, and a variety of sorts. I think that how the enterprise organizations, for example, the buy side, sell side groups on the financial services side versus large, retail companies or manufacturing companies or technology organizations or media or entertainment companies, the use cases for cybersecurity products differ drastically. And so where we've seen an interesting amount of consolidation in the security vendor space over the last few years has been adopting use cases across industries. And so a great example is a managed security service provider we've been working with since its sort of infancy back in 2018, founded by some, MDs at a Morgan Stanley. Obviously, a lot of business done within the FS space to start off in terms of where their relationship. But they built out such a effective detection and response platform that can manage not only your internal security risks, but also navigate third-party risks associated with the integrations into your systems. And they found that obviously that's prominent in the financial services industry. But for example, the supply chain industry is an industry that has really not seen the same amount of focus and attention put on this, and has a pretty large appetite for the same types of analytical solutions that the other sort of companies you'd think of in the financial services space that have this type of really important information traveling through multiple endpoints all the time. There's actually a lot of similarities in terms of how products can be effective within the organization. So, this one vendor in particular has done a huge amount of progress the last 2 years, specifically around securing a supply chain industry where, you find that there's more avenues for third parties to integrate than within a financial services company, which honestly, a bank is actually a pretty simple business when it boils down to what they do, right?
Which is so interesting because obviously banks are viewed as such complex behemoths and red tape here and bureaucracy there. To me, when it comes to the banks, I don't intend to oversimplify things, especially as an outsider to this space. But with the banks, it's really all about data, right? There's just massive amounts of data, and the obvious, protecting finances and things like that. But it seems, if we are simplifying it in financial services, like you say, it's really, data protection and the financial products and obviously like not getting hacked and losing billions of dollars.
And a lot of securing information from internal endpoints without potentially as many external third-party relationships, right? When it comes down to what it takes to manufacture a product versus offer the services that an investment bank offers, right? So, I didn't mean to simplify necessarily because it is quite complex, and that's why the industry was, industry that was highly sought after by the cyber vendor space initially, because there's so many use cases, there's money behind it, and the sensitivity is profound. But it actually, plays itself really well in some of the other industries as well, where, I think that's where we're going to see a lot more transformation in the next few years. So you're asking about talent, you're asking about sort of specifically how it's been between financial services industry and outside. I think that there has been a bit of a flow out of the financial services industry into other areas and markets where you can apply the same skill set and leverage that experience in a new environment, which poses challenges for the banks to retain their employees and have to sort of refill those seats.
Most definitely. And that doesn't make cybersecurity unique, right? Like,
correct.
The banks and financial services are potentially some of the best breeding grounds for developing professionals in the world. So like you say, there's so many use cases out there, whether it is internal data or, financial related, so many use cases to be able to apply to individuals who might be seeking new challenges or, looking in industries outside of tech. So that's a really good point, and something that I think we can stay optimistic about with the flow of talent as we hope that the markets kind of return to their normal cycles and an improved volume of roles as well. So I know something that you're pretty knowledgeable about, and something that our team here covers a lot, and roles that we support pretty actively is identity authentication. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in that space, what that means, and just generally, how we go about sourcing for it and what the talent pool looks like.
Yeah, no, definitely a hot topic. It's been on the radar for about a full decade now, since the large IAM players have come into the space and start to really offer a variety of solutions. But I think that the current challenges that people are faced with is there are new emerging technologies, whether it be blockchain, crypto type of Web3 technologies, and other sort of just data that is being accumulated in real time across the world that is now, having to offer authentication processes around how individuals get access to this information, right? And so this is just like an ever evolving, constantly increasing in scale type of environment. And so we've seen a lot of players trying to come into this space, building unique ways of, really leveraging AI to do a lot of the background legwork and investigative work that you would want an authentication product to be able to do. And so building large language models and identity graphs and building out enormous sort of data sets of information, and then being able to offer that in real split time sort of access to your customers is a extremely exciting challenge for technologists to get to deal with, and an extremely valuable problem for someone to be able to solve for the end users, right? So I think the adoption of AI into that, and the access to massive amounts of data and the processing of that in exceptionally short amounts of time, is obviously evolving quite quickly right now. And the people who can really stay at the forefront of the application of AI into this problem are going to be the ones to probably come out with the biggest contracts, right? But then they deal with their own challenges, because some of the most prominent companies, they don't have the brand recognition that the end users have, who are actually powered by this underlying technology, right? So when you think about security vendors and how they try and go to market, being behind the scenes is very much part of what it is. And then when you get to a certain point, you don't want to not be known, right? So that's an exciting challenge for them to deal with as they scale.
So as a consumer, identity authentication, right? My mind goes to two-factor authentication. My mind goes to my banking app telling me, is this you? You log in from a new phone. There's obviously so much more to that. And there are such advanced programs that are more than just, annoying for the consumer. Just let me in so I can go see my bank statement for the week.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think it's about thinking about layers and layers beneath that first layer of sort of dual factor authentication, right? So, okay, you sent the 5-digit code and you smiled at your camera, so now you're in here. But what IP address did you send the 5-digit code from versus what IP address are you logging in from right now? Is that a standard IP address for both of those devices? How often has that cell phone logged in from that IP address right? And then often with your computer and yourself, right? Because, there are definitely a lot of advanced technologies on the other side of this that are offering not the bad guys access to information that they don't need to have access to, right? And so that type of layering of authentication is stuff that is happening behind the scenes, but has a lot more maturization to go, because you think about what different types of data we're talking about. IP addresses and VPNs and sort of networking and infrastructure information is one small little bit, but you've got so much more when it comes to the type of personal information that you're now sharing through this, right? And so, social security numbers and your addresses and what those are linked to, and having a understanding of every address that someone has ever had in their life is really not something that most of the products on the street are offering people, right? And so there's work to be done to get to the point where in the split split of a second, you can click a button and authenticate an individual and their personal and financial and social background.
Again, as a consumer, it crosses my mind anytime I order from a new online store or anytime I consider signing up for some new newsletter or whatever. How willing am I to give this company or this platform my personal information? How secure? Do I trust that this is a secure company? That crosses my mind now. That wasn't something that generations before us had to think about, or even we did growing up.
No, we always just trusted it as we grew up, right? Because it was new. And that's exactly right. You sign in through Facebook, you sign in through Apple. What are they authenticating? They're authenticating an email address, a phone number, and a name. Right. And so okay, right. That's that you can get in now and smile at the camera, right? Or whatever you have to do to do that last step. So that's exactly the problem that is being solved, that the consumer is not so aware of how important this problem is.
Yes.
But the legal departments of the underlying, whether it be the website that you're buying that from or the brand or retailer that you're purchasing things from, right? They have underlying risk involved with their moderately secure versions of authentication being, exploited. So
how is AI benefiting, developing, growing cyber defense and cybersecurity, especially as it pertains to talent? And do you view AI as any sort of hindrance, even maybe like the hackers or the bad guys being able to have access to AI as a kind of like other side or to the coin or counter argument? Tell me about the advent of AI as it pertains to cybersecurity. We've had multiple episodes about AI in financial services and the advancements and benefits that it plays for finance. But let's talk about that for cyber for a bit here.
I stand firmly with the concept of, AI is not taking anyone's cybersecurity jobs in too many ways. It's really people who are able to leverage AI to do the cybersecurity jobs more effectively that are going to take the people's jobs who are not able to integrate AI into their current job. Right?
As is the case across the
case with any job anywhere, even I'd say blue collar type jobs, right? So I think that there's a huge amount of upfront investment that is being made into cybersecurity departments in the form of adopting AI into our solutions. So we're seeing that right now. I think that, yes, it is tremendously valuable because when you think about a lot of what cybersecurity is doing in so many ways, protecting data, right? Validating secure points. There's just so much application of rapid computation, getting through all of this information in a shorter and faster and more succinct amount of time. So, but that's been going on for years. I think how they are now looking at modernizing workflows, right? So 5-10 years ago, we had companies like Phantom who got bought by Splunk, who were building security operations playbooks. Splunk got ahead of that and embedded that into their services. And so that's gone really, really well for them. But it's that type of, I think, adoption that we will, continue to see. I think the interesting point you raise around, the bad guys getting access to this is, how are we going to build the right metrics and governance around these AI tools such that they do not become extremely compromising to the security standards and metrics that we've created. And we're pretty over my head at this point, right? I do not have a comp sci PhD, and I just think that's a challenging problem to solve for folks, where first we're going to get it all into our current environment and it's going to start to transform the way that things work. And then, how are we going to make sure that that doesn't get outside the lines of what we've really tried to create over the years? And we're seeing
slow.
It's definitely slippery, right? And I think I do not have an answer, right, in terms of what I think is the course of action or whatever.
and I won't force you into one. We certainly don't want to talk out of our depth. I think as I hear you saying that, what's interesting to me is cybersecurity is protection, right? It's threat protection. It is data protection.
Yeah.
It is protection. Utilizing AI so much as a protection is that slippery slope that you're referring to. Like, is overutilizing it almost bringing it completely full circle that it could then become dangerous?
Correct. Like this is all open source technology that we're talking about.
Right.
Right. And so, people are going to have to build things in house, right? That's
Proprietary is this direct.
Right? Yeah. I mean, you're going to have to build proprietary AI solutions embedded into your security solutions where you are not sharing that data with anyone outside of the data centers that you deal with. Right. And then you can be at peace when you collect money from your customers every month and know that you are doing the right things with their information.
Yes, exactly. One last question, then I want to get into our last segment, especially in financial services, as more CEOs are leading their teams and their firms back into office, especially 5 days a week. There are the outliers, and there are those who are actually refuting that and still encouraging hybrid work. What does that look like for cyber teams? Are cyber teams in office? Are they primarily, are they viewed as an essential workforce that needs collaboration, or are the candidates driving that they prefer to have hybrid? What does the return to work look like for the cybersecurity community? Excuse me.
Yeah, no, great question. I'm glad you asked. I started off talking a little bit about the increased value that they have and how that plays out in terms of employers looking to retain them and attract them. So I do want to think about this across the three buckets of types of professionals we deal with in security, right? So the builders, the super technical folks, they're the ones that leverage their skill set the most in the form of looking for some flexibility. Right. And we find the most amount of flexibility offered to that grouping of folks with highly technical backgrounds where they're genuinely building heads down and can therefore be very effective without having as much interaction with the stakeholders. Now, there are a large group of folks on the architecture side who actually really need to be embedded within engineering teams and be an advisor across the whole enterprise and engineering org. And so those roles, are clearly much more stakeholder facing and have not necessarily been areas we've seen, companies make, exceptions to their sort of revised policies on returning to work, right? So I would say that, you talk about security operations center folks, there are people that genuinely are in a security operations center for 24 hours a day. And so you have three different workforces that work around the clock in different parts of the world. Those folks are still in that environment. And then, the last grouping of sort of policymakers, I think that it's their whole role is to work amongst stakeholders and be a valuable resource, wide governance, sort of be the guard. You can't put bumpers on a bowling alley if the bumpers aren't there that day. You know what I mean? So yes. Oh, our right bumper's off. So roll it up against the left side today if you can. It doesn't work that well in that sort of operational function. So in the same light across the wider technology industry outside of cyber, we're folks that deal with stakeholders have to be in the office, leadership, strategic, architecture, folks that are heads down building have been able to retain a bit more flexibility. Although, now we've got Amazon and even the big tech players doing it, which, doesn't offer an outlet for these folks working at the banks to run away from the 5 days a week. I think that generally we will continue to see an adoption.
Super insightful, super interesting. And obviously, that last segment applies to both our candidates and our clients, right? And whether the clients are still deciding what to do with their teams or whether candidates are looking for what they want out of their next role or their current situation. I think some really useful points there. So let's close with a segment that I like to call underhyped or overhyped. So you tell me, the demand for cybersecurity, obviously we're very much in the thick of it. It's grown, it's developed already. But the demand for cybersecurity is still underhyped, or it's already reached its peak, it's behind us, and this is what we have is what we got. It's overhyped.
You're not giving me an out of appropriately hyped, which might be closer to my answer. But there is a huge amount of transformation that will continue to happen in the industry. And we don't even know what some of the hype looks like yet, even to the point of our conversation today. So I'm going to stand on the underhyped side of the spectrum here and very cautiously optimistic and quite excited about where things head for the industry, because I think we've been through a lot of consolidation over the last decade, earlier in the last 10-year cycle, basically. And now with what we're hoping and seeing in terms of alleviating interest rates a little bit, some more of the money on the sidelines coming back into the game, I think we'll see another transformation of this industry where we have a bunch of small startups coming up and building new product lines, and some will prevail and transform the industry in ways that we're not currently aware of.
So far, our technology-related episodes have been underhyped. I think we've gotten underhyped on the generative AI and AI in financial services and AI in recruiting. So it seems that as long as it's technology, we have not yet reached the peak, and we're still on this journey. So that makes a lot of sense. Last two questions from me, other than Searching Smarter, of course. What is a podcast that you're currently listening to? And what is a book that you're currently reading?
I love this question, and I hope that you like my answers. So a podcast that I have been listening to over the last years and most recently is actually a pregnancy podcast, bottle service for kids. And it is a cute podcast that started by a woman in social media who became pregnant and basically outlines the 40-week journey and what she's feeling. And it was so fun during my wife's first pregnancy to listen week by week and relate as best as you can from the passenger seat, so to speak, in this regard. So I'll give a shout to Baby Bottle Service on the podcast front, big time.
Nice, love it. And now you're a father of two.
I'm a father of two. I've heard the 40 weeks over and over, and now we listen to the ones about like dealing with a second kid, and it's fun. They bring on other moms and other folks who have interesting perspectives. So it's just been fun. And then on the book front, not an extremely avid reader. The amount of personal time that I have has diminished quite significantly. What I enjoyed most recently actually was a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F Word. And I thought that it was I appreciated the perspective on inner confidence and how to approach the unknown, because I'm super passionate about the idea of being outside your comfort zone all the time and still feeling comfortable in that environment. And I thought it was an interesting take on the situation. So there we have it.
Well, an absolute pleasure having you on today.
Thank you, Jay.
I learned a lot, and I'm excited for us to be able to promote your knowledge and Glocomms, therefore representative knowledge of the cybersecurity industry and space, and our ability to showcase that to clients, candidates alike. So thank you, GC, Giancarlo, for those who know him in the business world. And I will see you around the office very soon.
Yes, sir. Have a great rest of your morning.
And you.
Bye-bye.
That's all for today's episode of Searching Smarter. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, keep searching smarter.